Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ace Parenting Together Authentic, Connected, and Empathic. My name is Babak Saraje, and I'm here with my co host, Melissa LaPlante. We bring you fresh perspectives and ideas about best parenting practices, along with time tested communication skills to use in real life situations to help you and your family be your authentic selves, build empathic connections, and thrive in your relationships. So today we decided to take a moment and answer some frequently asked questions, especially about parent effectiveness training. And some of these are questions that I have heard over and over, and some of them are ones that I have heard recently from some parents. So the first question I have for you, Melissa, is how is parent effectiveness training different from being permissive?
That's a really good question because it's easy to listen and find out information about parent effectiveness training and mistakenly think that it's essentially letting your kid have their way, when in fact it's quite the opposite. Permissive parenting is actually very, very dangerous to the relationship and the connection between you and your child. Because what's happening is you, as the parent, don't want to create friction. You want to be happy and you want your kid to be happy. So you pretty much allow them to do what they want because it's easier that way. But what happens in that situation is then your needs as the parent aren't met. And over time, you can grow to essentially resent your child um, for not recognizing you have needs, but
Right.
yet you're not communicating them. And so permissive parenting is really not a way to connect with your child, which is different from parent effectiveness training, because in parent effectiveness training, when there is conflict, and when there are issues between you and your child, or between family members, PET allows you to confront, right, using those I messages.
Mm-hmm.
And then the major difference is that in parent effectiveness training strategies, nobody loses, right? So you're not letting your child win. In fact, you both win,
Yeah.
because what it allows you to do is to work together, as family members, as parent child, husband
Right.
wife, sibling to sibling, on making sure everybody's needs are met. It's not
Mhm.
compromising. It's how can we fix this problem where everybody's needs are met. And that's
That's
very different from permissive. Because the
that's right.
minute you as the parent have to give up, or compromise, and you don't feel good about it, you feel like you're giving something up, it's in that regards, that is where it slips into that, permissive
Yeah,
parenting. Does
that's
that
right.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and that is really a great way to put it because the I don't know, the more traditional parenting is to bring your authority and power and impose it on the child. The parent knows
Yes,
best and
right.
all of that. And one way to get away from that is to say, okay, well, I have no power, and the kids can do whatever, and that's what we call permissive parenting.
Right.
And of course, that completely reverses the roles. So now instead of the parent always winning at the expense of the child, it's the child who is winning at the expense of the parent, and that has basically all the same problems, just in reverse. And
Absolutely.
the
Hmm.
parents' needs are not met. They're trying to bend over backwards to make everything, the way that the children want. And honestly, if you have more than one child, you probably can't do that even because the
Right.
children will have some problems with each other. The one
Absolutely.
child
Yep.
wants something, the other child wants something else, and you're going to go crazy trying to get both of those,
Yep.
in the same picture. And parent effectiveness training is the great equalizer, basically. It's the third way of going forward where it doesn't matter how many people are involved in the relationship, how many children, we are focused on finding solutions to problems and using effective communication to express and listen to understand and solve problems instead of compromising, which basically means that some of the needs are going to be ignored.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
So I have a question for you,
Okay.
Babek. Is PET, parent effectiveness training, the same as conscious parenting or positive discipline? There's so many
Right.
out there.
Yes, so there are many parenting frameworks and approaches and paradigms, moving away from what we call authoritarian parenting, this sort of power-based approach. And indeed, there are some overlaps. I think the thing, lots of like positive discipline or other types of positive parenting, conscious parenting, and so on. Um, they do move away from that authoritarian approach. But the thing that makes parent effectiveness training different and sort of maybe somewhat unique is that the focus really is not on shaping behavior. You're not here to just say, okay, positive discipline, for example, is basically positive reinforcement, right? So you are giving a lot of positive reinforcement so that you get the behaviors that you want to see more of in the child. And instead of doing punishments, you're basically doing a lot of the opposite. You can call it rewards or whatever. And then there are other approaches, maybe some of them, they all have different names. But again, the focus is on maybe not using punishments, using consequences, natural consequences, I don't know, logical consequences, and so on, which is sort of giving some negative reinforcement in some ways to shape behavior. And the focus is on shaping behavior. And that sort of behaviorism, in a sense, is not what we have in parent effectiveness training. Parent effectiveness training, the focus is on effective communication, authentic communication, so that the words and the message actually match the feelings. You understand the other side's, feelings and the child's feelings and so on, and really solving problems.
Yep.
Do you agree with that?
I do. Yeah, it is. There's lots of different ways. Like you said, so many programs have, similar sounding techniques and focus. And like you said, it's great that it is moving away from that authoritarian parenting style. But PET is unique in that it's the only parenting program out there that actually sort of gives you that third way of managing conflict and problems and raising our kids to be responsible. So while there are some similarities, PET stands out from that perspective.
Exactly. And kind of maybe a different way of putting it is that principles and the skills, the communication skills in parent effectiveness training are not only applicable to parent-child relationship. They can be applied to all sorts of relationships, adult relationships, other relationships in work. And in fact, there are programs for those that have been developed by Dr. Gordon. And so, but if you take, for example, positive discipline and you try to apply that to your relationship with your friend, it sounds very strange.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's where I agree with you. That's sort of what sets PET apart, for sure.
That's right. All right. So I have a question for you now.
Okay, get me.
Is PET completely against coercion and using parental power?
So the quick and short answer to that is essentially yes. At the core of parent effectiveness training is a focus on communication, self-disclosure, being able to authentically communicate with your child, being able to communicate and confront when you as a parent have a problem with a behavior or with something your child has said. And the techniques are specifically the opposite of controlling. In fact,
Mhm.
you know, Dr. Gordon talks so much about how controlling um, is just so destructive to a child gaining independence, and their autonomy, and the ability to then go on and solve problems outside when they're living independently off at college, working professionals. Those
Right.
lessons on independent problem solving and feeling confident in their own identity within the family from a very young age. Really, the research just consistently shows from the inception of this program in the 60s to date that that children raised with that philosophy are incredibly more successful
Mhm.
in school, and in the community, and families live a much more peaceful and happy, for lack of
Mhm.
better words,
Mhm.
lifestyle. It's not
Mhm.
to say that there isn't conflict. It's just that
Yeah,
when you're focusing on effectiveness training techniques, the goal of PET is to spend the most amount of time in that no problem area, right?
that's right.
And so that means that, a pretty great percentage of your time you're in the no problem area, which
That's right. Where you can build
so
relationships, right?
yeah. So the short answer is yes. Dr. Gordon, when he developed this program, he vehemently talks about the negative effects of controlling as a parent.
Right. That's true.
So, okay, I have another question for you, my friend. Um, Kind of along those same lines, and I get this question a lot when I'm coaching parents, and when I'm doing a PET class. Don't you
Mhm.
think it's okay to use power in some situations when the child does not do what you ask them to do?
Right. Right. Yeah. So, of course, the question is actually assuming that the parent should have the power to tell the child what to do, and they should follow suit.
Right.
Um, so that premise is already in conflict with sort of the philosophy that we
Yep.
have expressed, and it's expressed in parent effectiveness training. But there are indeed situations where, I mean, I think parents usually ask this question and bring some examples. I don't know,
Sure.
your child is running in front of a bus. Should I not, take them and move them to safety? Or a toddler maybe who is stepping into a busy street, or things like that. And I think of course, in those situations where there is an imminent danger, right, that I can see and maybe my child cannot see or cannot understand yet, it is my job to keep them safe, right? So I have to protect them. And that is like, if they could express themselves, that is also what they would say, right? Yeah, of course, take me away from this oncoming bus.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, unfortunately, that those extreme situations are used as an example, basically, to do that in all other situations.
Yeah.
And these other situations are not a child in front of a bus. I want my child to go and put on his shirt. He's not in front of a bus, right?
Right. Exactly.
And so maybe I want to get out the door, or do whatever, and I'm having a problem because they're not ready, and that doesn't mean that I have to force them to a certain way. If
Right.
there is resistance, that means that they may be having a problem. They want to do something, so I need to understand what their perspective is and shift gears and listen to them and understand what is going on, so that
Yep.
we can together solve that problem. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes there may be, we're not perfect. There may be situations where I can't really think of what to do. And I end up using power or coercing my child to do something. And that presents a problem for me to think through and with my child to see how we can do better. Because
Yep.
eventually the goal is to reduce these situations where somebody forces someone else to do something. We want
Yep.
all to exercise our agency and not be controlled by others.
Sure. No, yeah, and again, it's going back to that whole control issue, and like you said, there's so many times where when we think, oh my gosh, if I could just control this situation, this could happen so much faster, right?
Right.
Um, and then you think of those situations. I thought of another one while you were talking about, the kid jumping out in front of the bus, or a kid in the preschool, or even at home that grabs scissors and starts running.
Right.
They don't necessarily know or might not recognize the danger that can happen. So that's, again, another time where you're not going to necessarily send your child an iMessage and talk them through it. You're going to quickly react. You're going to remove the danger, which means removing the scissors from them. They might
Hmm.
get upset. But then once the danger is over, that's when you want to go into confronting your child and using those iMessages to say,
Right.
I'm sorry that I had to take those from you so quickly, and here's why,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And that way you can avoid the issue of that child feeling controlled. And like you said, they're going to feel loved and protected when they're given the chance to understand what is happening.
Absolutely, that's right. And there's this has a long sort of, we can go on and on about what actually needs to be done. So in those
Sure.
situations, of course, we want to remove the scissors altogether so that they don't access it in the first place if they're not at a point where they can
Absolutely.
use it safely and so on.
Yep,
Yeah.
for sure.
All right. So here's my next question for you.
Okay, I'm
Um,
ready.
I hear that parent effectiveness training recommends not using praise. I thought praise is a good thing. Why shouldn't we praise our children?
Again, that's another really good question, and it's one of the other ones that I have a lot of parents asking me in my classes, and when I'm coaching them individually, because it just seems so paradoxical. It just seems like, what in the world could possibly be wrong with praising? Um,
Right.
but it does make sense when you really start to recognize why.
Hmm.
Praising is is not going to add to the connection between the relationship that you have with you and your kid, or anybody in the family.
Hmm.
When you are praising, you're really focusing on judging the behavior, and labeling the behavior,
Hmm.
and you're putting your own spin on the behavior that your child is engaging in.
Right.
And also, what that is doing is, especially when you're using the praising as a way to, and I hate to use this word, but to manipulate, in the
Yeah.
sense that, yes, when you positively reinforce, the basic premise with psychology of reinforcing the positive behaviors, you'll get more of those behaviors. We know that.
Hmm.
But what research has found is that when it comes to the parent child relationship, um, they feel very judged, and it's very disconnecting, to hear, oh, you're such a good girl, and again, it's not that you're not sending positive messages to your child. The
Hmm.
way that we can reinforce, right, or let our children know when they're engaging in a behavior that pleases us, that is accepting, right, and
Yeah.
that those are those positive I messages. So I want to be very clear that it's not that we're not positively, communicating with our children when they do something, you walk out. My daughter, her favorite thing to do is surprise me, when I'm so exhausted at the end of the night and I'm going to bed, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know it was my turn to
Right.
unload the dishwasher, but I can't. And then I wake up the next morning and she had stayed up
It's not.
later
Yeah.
and so that's, and so my message to her was, I love when you do something for me just because you could see that it was going to be helpful, right?
Yeah.
And that's me sending a positive I message,
Right.
because it's her behavior positively impacted me,
That's right.
and I love her for that. So
Yeah.
that is that's PET's version of, reward or praise. but so different in the sense that our goal is to strengthen the connection between ourselves and our
Yeah,
kid so that we spend more time in that no problem zone
that's right.
versus trying to manipulate them to do the right thing.
That's right. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And that difference between manipulation and sort of focusing on behavior that you want to see more
Right.
versus the effective and authentic self disclosure of your own positive feelings about what is going on. That's
Right.
really crucial. And
Yeah.
also, praising also creates this sort of external motivator or external, uh, instead of an intrinsic motivation,
Sure.
this external motivation to do things. And there are cases where children become kind of dependent on that because they do this so that they can get the praise that makes them feel good and
Yep.
but then they're not really doing the thing that they're actually interested in for their own intrinsic reasons.
Right.
And actually today I had a class where we talked about this praise, and there was this clear difference when we use some examples of praise and then turn them into positive I messages.
Yeah.
And when they were expressed as positive I messages, like you were saying, for example, oh, I feel so good, or taken care of when you did this
Mhm.
for me, for example,
Yeah.
instead of, oh, you're such a good girl for doing that.
Right.
And or good job or great job. Or when we
Yeah.
turned them over, everybody started feeling so warm and positive. And it was because
Yeah.
it was really the way that it was, like it was felt by
Yep.
the parent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I think it's your turn.
It is my turn. So, all right, my friend, I have the next question for you. Gosh, this is another really big one that I get a lot. Shouldn't we prepare our kids for the real world with some tough love? The real world is full of coercion, and if kids are not ready for it, they're going to break. If I keep coddling and sheltering them, so it's in essence, shouldn't we be preparing our kids for tough love?
Yeah, that's a very common question, and a common approach, right? Lots of times parents end up doing things that they think, this is how the real world is, so I need to prepare my kid for it, for the real world, and that's tough. So, tough luck. Go to deal with it, right? And I get that. We want to get them ready for what's out there, um, but I think the problem with that approach is that yes, there is lots of environments out there where things are not communications are not effective, people are not using iMessages and so on. But what you're going to do in that situation really depends on what you have learned to do at home, right? And that's the place where we can really provide the skills and the tools for kids to be able to function in those environments. I have seen many situations at work and just in the society where people just come at each other and start accusing each other and whatever the problem is, instead of saying what the problem actually is. What is it, how does it make them feel, and so on. And when you use that iMessage, it suddenly changes the game, because I now have expressed how it makes me feel. And if you continue with that behavior, you basically are saying, yeah, you should feel like that. And it becomes quite apparent, right? And that is creating a problem for me.
Sure.
But it also has this immediate effect on the other person that, oh, well, okay, I see that this is making you feel like this,
Hmm.
and I don't want to make you feel like that. Now, this may not be the perfect like iMessage active listening interaction, but because I have used an iMessage that sort of neutralizes that tough situation, and
Absolutely.
um, allows the parties or the other person and myself to continue to find some solutions.
Sure.
So I would say, really, our homes are the place where you can grow love and show real love, and that's what children need to thrive and be able to deal with the difficulties out there.
Yeah. Because when we're using the techniques that we use with PET, um, what happens is that child is able to go out into the world and recognize when people are responding to them in the way that doesn't feel right. But they
Right.
have developed such autonomy, independence, and ability to self disclose that
Hmm.
they can manage when other
Right.
people are interacting with them in a way that is not congruent with what they're raised with, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, like you said, those abilities, those, self-confidence, for example, to deal with problems and knowing that you can solve problems together and so on, that really changes the equation.
Yeah,
And so we want people, children who grow up to be people who make the world better,
yeah.
not just, who can, survive under falling rocks.
Absolutely. And I actually can tell you, I did a post on my Instagram page
Mhm.
about tough love, and I actually had the honor to have my daughter respond. I asked her how she felt about tough love and what it would feel like if she was given tough love. And
Mhm.
so you can check on my Instagram page and look back, you'll see it. She gives such a beautiful response to why she's so grateful she wasn't raised with tough love and how it would make
Right.
her feel, and how being raised with PET has actually given her more confidence and more
Right.
self awareness. And so, if you get a chance, go check
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah,
Mm.
that's great. And that's at Best Parenting Today, right?
That's correct. That's
That's
correct.
right.
Yeah.
And we will have those links also in the description. All right. I think I have a question for you.
Yes, you do.
Yes. So this also goes back to the sort of relationship between parents and kids,
Yeah.
who knows best. So on. So it says, but kids are not yet mature and have not developed their brains fully. How am I supposed to include them in making decisions when I know much better what's good for them?
The way I always answer this question, Babak, because obviously we're putting frequently asked questions, so we get these a lot. Is what we don't know, and what the general public doesn't know, but scientists do, is that the brain of a child is severely untapped by us. They have an unbelievable ability to problem solve even
Hmm.
at a young toddler age. Now, the kind of problems that they're solving are going to be age appropriate. So I'm not going to ask my child to solve a problem from a dissertation, right? But
Hmm.
that, 2 and 3 year old has the skills to solve a problem that a 2 and 3 year old, 4 year old is facing. If you, as the parent, are providing them the opportunity with the active listening and giving them strategies to guide them to figure it out on their own, it we just aren't giving our kids enough credit.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with that. And the problems that children face, or problems that I might have with my children, they are already age appropriate because that's the problem that they're having,
Exactly.
right? so
Yeah.
so that's what they care about. I don't think a 3-year-old cares about solving, I don't know, a calculus problem,
Exactly.
um, right? So the problem that they're having in that moment is something that they care about and they are interested in, and they can contribute to.
Yeah.
Like you said, with the right approach by listening and including them in the decision making. Um, and yes, I might think I know better. This is the answer. Here's what you need to do, of course, to do it. But I also think about this as this visual of, let's say a child. There are these blocks with certain shapes. A toddler or maybe a younger child is playing with. So trying to fit a square into, I don't know, a bunch of different shapes, maybe a
Sure.
circle. But if I see my child is trying to fit the square into a circle and it doesn't fit, of course I know better. Of course I can go and immediately put it in the right
Yeah.
shape. But if I do that, not only I have hampered the growth and problem solving ability and all of that for my
Sure.
kid, I I have basically taken away their autonomy, and I think this is going to receive a lot of resistance. The child would be like, no, let me do this, right?
Yeah.
Unless they kind of ask for help, and then I can maybe show them once, and then they say, oh, okay, maybe I want, but, or maybe they actually get a great joy trying to see if this circle fits in the triangle.
Exactly.
That's just fun.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
And, again, when we come at our kids with a way to solve the problem, remember that's how you would solve the problem.
Right.
And
Right.
maybe you know best for yourself, right? But your child is his or her own individual. And, if you create a solution for them, if it doesn't work, well, then they're upset with you because you were supposed to have the answer. And if you do
Right.
have a solution and it does happen to work for your child, then you're sending the message that you need me in order to solve
That's
your
right.
problems. So in either
That's right.
situation,
Yeah.
both situations are really disconnecting, and
Right.
not allowing the child
Yeah.
to independently learn to problem solve.
Yeah. And disempowering, really.
Sure.
Good.
So
I
I
think we have.
think I get the honor of the last question. So, Babak, my spouse does not use PET, and he believes in using punishment and rewards. If I start using PET, wouldn't that confuse my kids? Now, that's not my real
No,
situation.
not your spouse.
This is a typical question when we get one parent who is coming because they're very anxious to learn these techniques, and it's pretty common for them
Right.
to then say, but what about my spouse, my husband, my wife?
Right.
They're not learning it. So how do you respond to
That's right.
that?
Yeah, so that's also very typical because, change sort of starts usually with some person or, lots of times by chance. And maybe the other person is not ready, and the other parent. And so what I would say is that, first of all, it's a myth that parents need to be always, have this united front. Um, that is a myth because that also, again, creates this inauthentic, manipulative situation where we're basically trying to be like us versus them,
Yep.
parents versus or against kids.
Yep.
And that's not really what we want, right?
No.
We want to be on the same team.
Yep.
And so if I start using PET, but my partner, my spouse is not using PET, then using PET immediately starts to improve my relationship with the kids, right? And the other person, the other parent, also can use PET. Maybe they won't. We can have conversations about it, and once the change starts, maybe something will change later on. But even if they never do, it still creates a better relationship between myself and the children, right? And that is better for everybody, I think. For the children who can have an authentic relationship with at least one of their parents. And for me, of course, because I then have this, improved relationship with my children.
Absolutely.
Do you have something to add
Great
to that,
response.
Melissa?
No, it's I feel exactly the same way. And that is exactly how I describe it to parents that are in that situation. And it's, a lot of times it's actually more common than not, because then the other parent will be like, wow, well, this is really working well for him or her. So, maybe it's my turn, So, the hope is that they begin to see the benefits, and then sort of kind of follow suit, and learn it themselves.
Exactly. Okay, so I think that's all we have for frequently asked questions. Maybe we'll do one more at some other point with other questions. Yeah, great. So thank you for listening to this episode of Ace Parenting Together, authentic, connected, and empathic. We're working to bring you content on best parenting practices that's worth your time and adds not to the noise, but to the signal. Let us know what you want to hear on this podcast. All questions about parenting and thinking through real life situations are welcome. See you next time.